The final beyond. We had truly come to the final beyond. We came out in an unfamiliar monochrome landscape, and I could already hear Gale having a small panic attack. We were back in his nightmare, the place he had nearly been trapped for until he was used up, and when Celine hissed at me to help him, I tried to catch Gale as he went down. Buddy barked a little, confused and unsure of what was happening, but I quieted him down as Celine tried to get Gale moving again. He was mumbling to himself, at odds with what he knew he had to do, and when I yoked him up beside me, I think it surprised him as much as it did me. "You can have a mental breakdown once we get out of here. For now, I need you on your feet. You've lived through too much of this place to let it snatch you at the very end." He shook himself, my words getting through to him, and after a few more reassuring pets to let Buddy know it was okay, we headed into the blank and endless aisles of the final store. This place was just as ghoulish as I remembered it. The shelves seemed to hold the ghosts of old products, and it wasn't long before we encountered the ghost of explorers who'd come before us. Buddy made a whining noise as we skirted them, the hollow after-images troubling him as they went about the last moments of their lives in silent monotony. Celine looked troubled too. This was her first time in the miasma's home, and watching the quiet ghosts as they went about their time seemed to make her anxious. We were reminded that we weren't the only residents of this place a few minutes later, as the rumble of a miasma grated against our ears. It was on the next row over, thankfully, but we pressed ourselves against the shelves like it still might be able to see us through the slab. If it sensed us at all, it gave no sign. It just kept its course and moved down the infinite aisles on whatever work it was about. I was already sweating under my covering, the lights getting a little hot beneath it, and I was hoping this wouldn't take too long. The last thing we wanted to do was catch fire. "I can't believe you came here by yourself," Celine said to Gale. "You either," she added after thinking about it. "I didn't," I said quietly, ruffling Buddy's ears. "I had Buddy with me." He looked up happily, nuzzling my hand. "We better get going," Gale said. "Who knows how many of them there are around here." We went faster then, taking departments at random as we tried to find the exit we all knew had to be here. I think, even then, I suspected it would be in the crystal area, but we couldn't use Buddy to find it this time. I'd been using Gale's scent last time, but Buddy didn't have anything to fix on this time. He was flying as blind as we were, looking around frantically as if expecting to see something that would help us. If he was finding any landmarks, he kept them to himself. It all looked exactly the same to me and Gale, and as we ran, I kept an ear out for the rumbling footsteps of our captors. The miasma always sounded gigantic when they walked. They were pretty huge, I suppose, and it made them easy to hear in the otherworldly quiet of this place. For such a huge place, the silence that surrounded us was almost deafening. Nothing seemed to exist in this place, aside from us and the miasma, and I was very aware of the noise we were making as we beat feet. Given what I've told you, it must sound odd to hear that nothing seemed to exist here, but it's all I can do to describe it. The ghosts made no sound, the store had no ambience, and even the music that was present in many of the others was silent here. The place was so effortlessly oppressive that it made sense for it to act as a cage for those the miasma had captured. This place felt like a tomb more than anything, and I prayed it wouldn't be ours. For all his talk of hurrying, Gale was almost the reason we got caught the first time. We were hustling down an aisle, trying to find some sign that we were getting close, when Gale stopped dead in his tracks. I'd seen the ghost guy, the one holding hands with the woman as they ran, but when Gale stopped and Celine put her hand to her mouth, I knew who we must have found. I had to admit, there was a resemblance between the two of us. No wonder Gale mixed us up so often. He was young, probably in his early 20s, with thick hair and glasses. He was on the heavier side, but not fat. His face was round and boyish, and I imagine he had an infectious smile. I would have to imagine because the look on his face was full of terror. The girl was younger than him, probably 19 or 20, but she looked no less terrified. I like to think that maybe they had tried to make an escape too, the way Gale and I had. But they hadn't quite gotten out. In the end, he had managed to find her, but it had gotten him caught too. "Rudy," Gale said, reaching out and wincing as his hand passed through the kid's face. Rudy was saying something to the girl, Margot, I assumed, and he took no notice of Gale as he stood, stuck in his last moments of freedom. "Gale," Celine said, her own hand resting on his shoulder, "I know it's rough, but we have to go." "How?" Gale asked, his eyes locked on his lost son. "How can I just leave him here? He's my son, Celine. How can I just abandon him?" Celine was crying, but as she tried to comfort him, I could already hear the rumbles getting closer and closer. "You didn't abandon him. He's been gone for a long time. Even if we found him, it wouldn't be him anymore. He's been used up by now." "You don't know that. You can't know that. He could still be here, just trapped in the crystal. We could still save him. We could..." The slow rumbles were building, like thunder on the horizon. "He's gone, Gale. As much as I wish it were otherwise, he's gone. We have to get out of here. We have to get out so we can ensure that no one else gets trapped here and suffers the way he did. If we escape, then we can warn people, but if we stay, we'll be gone too." Buddy whined deep in his throat, and I turned to the two of them as Gale seemed to dither before the image of his precious son. "Guys, one of them's coming. We've got to move, or we're gonna get caught." Gale couldn't seem to pull himself away from the image of his lost son, but as that terrible darkness appeared at the end of the row, I took him by the arm and led him all the way to the end of the aisle as it turned in another direction. Peeking from the other side of the end cap, I could see it looking around, clearly expecting to find something here. Maybe it had heard us, maybe it had sensed us, but either way, we had escaped again. As it moved away, I turned and finally realized something from my previous trip. The older woman in the floral print dress was still hunched where we had left her, and I grinned as I realized I knew where we were. "Come on," I whispered, and the four of us set off. If Gale looked back, I missed it. All I knew was that the four of us were off like a shot. I took corners as I remembered them. Buddy was also moving with an ease that made me hope that he too remembered where we were going. The rumbles never got very close, and as we came to the edge of the crystalline garden, I felt a surge of joy rush through me. If there was an exit, it had to be here. Celine's eyes went from the flinty fear of a hunted animal to the bright sparkle of enchantment. The crystal forest, while mostly sharp angles and strange geometry, was still hauntingly beautiful. It was hard not to look at it as a thing of beauty until you realized its purpose. The ones on the outskirts wouldn't have more than bits floating in them, I assumed at least, but the ones in the middle could have mostly whole people in them. As we walked amongst the giant crystals, I clutched my wooden club a little tighter. The miasma would definitely come if we started smashing them, but how long would that take them? One look at Gale told me he was thinking the same thing, and was barely containing the urge to start swinging. Do we Do we know what we're looking for? Celine asked, keeping her voice low. She seemed afraid to talk too loudly, afraid of what might hear her, and I leaned down a little so I could whisper too. I'm guessing it's something we'll know when we see it. Maybe, Gale said as we trudged. We might have already walked past it and not realized it. I can't imagine it's here for them, or they'd be all over our world. Then why is it here? Even as I asked it, I knew it was significant. It had to be in the DGB for, I don't really know, but its purpose had never really occurred to me. It was like that thing in the backyard my mom used to catch wasps in. You just sort of stopped thinking about it after a while and kept existing. You knew the wasps in there were suffering before they died, but they were just wasps after all. Was that maybe how the miasmas saw us? We were just humans after all. Why not trap us in their version of a jar until they were ready to shake out all the corpses and start again? Hell, they wouldn't even have to do that. They, much like the Native American hunters, used all the parts of their prey. These things were efficient, if it was their doing in the first place. We should spread out a little, I said, as the crystal forest spread out before and behind us. We could cover more ground that way. Sounds like a great way to get snatched, Gale said, cutting me off. We need to stay together. Otherwise, we're just asking to get picked up. If we stay here too long, we might get grabbed. If we split up, we might get grabbed. No matter what we do, there's a chance we're gonna get grabbed. I didn't come this far to get grabbed out of hand. With any luck, we'll get close to whatever the exit is before we get seen. Guys, Celine said, but we cut her off. We've got to be smart about this, Gale. We need to get out of here as soon as possible. We can just stay close to each other, like within 10 or 20 feet, so we can call out or something. Guys, Celine said again, and Gale turned just before he could fire back. We were deep in the grove, strange crystal trees all around us, and the black door that floated a few feet off the ground was hard to miss. It was about 6 feet tall, the surface made of dark wood with a handle of blackened metal. I could see markings on the surface once I got close, and the swirls looked old and kind of angry. The door stood out like a sore thumb amongst the alien plant life, and I felt like it might be a little too obvious. Think this is what we're looking for? I asked, reaching out shakily to touch the surface. Only one way to find out, Gale said, reaching for the knob and twisting. Wait, Celine said. What if it's a... But Gale had committed to the action now, and as the door came open with a harsh grind, a shriek arose from deep inside the monochrome store. It was a noise I had heard before as I lay in the outside and tried to make myself as small as possible. They're coming, I told him, taking my flashlight in my other hand as Celine threw off her cloak. We gotta get out of here. I turned to find Gale struggling with the heavy door, the muscles in his arms standing out as he strained at it. I can't imagine how that old man got this open by himself. This thing feels like it weighs a ton. I saw the problem as the rust began to flake off the hinges. The door had stood here for God only knew how long, and the hinges had calcified. Whenever it was the hermit had been here, the door had been used very little since. Gale was pushing against it with all his might, but he was having trouble getting any headway. The crystalline trees shuddered under the footsteps of the miasma, and I braced for a fight. Almost, Gale grunted, heaving with all his might, and I saw he had managed to get it open about a foot. The 3 dark shadows were coming through the crystal forest, and as I threw off my cloak too, I reached down to snatch Buddy's off, and we shone like beacons. I looked up to find a 4th trying to come in on our left, a 5th from our right, and I was sure there would be others trying to come in at our backs. They They must have somehow known that the door was opened, and as the beams of our flashlights grated out, I heard Buddy bark as he pulled at his leash. The lead miasma reached out with a pair of hands the size of manhole covers, but when it tried to grab Celine, its hands lost their fullness. They passed harmlessly through her, through me, and Buddy too, and the miasma seemed confused. It lifted its hands and looked at them, not sure why it couldn't grab us. The 5 of them seemed unsure of how to approach us, and when the door creaked open with an almost painful grinding sound, we all turned to find Gale waving us inside. "Come on, before they..." but stopped as something grabbed him from the other side of the portal. It was a hand made of living darkness, a black so dark it made the black of the monochrome look dull. It snatched Gale inside before we could take so much as a step towards it. "Come on!" Celine yelled, barreling inside as Buddy and I followed afterward. I stopped long enough to catch the door, not wanting the miasma to follow us somehow, and we stepped into a strange new place. As the door slammed behind us, Celine, Buddy, and I found ourselves in a place we had only read about. It was dark, like a child's room without a nightlight, and the only light seemed to come from the slightly glowing floor tiles. They were the same pattern as the linoleum in the Dollar General stores, and they floated in the air like phantom stepping stones. Everything floated here, as a matter of fact. The shelves, the floor, the weird glowing fungus that grew on everything. It all seemed to float in the void that hung around us. Amidst it all was something else, something different. In the midst of the floating space was a green glowing stone, and it pulsated with unknown power. We looked around, trying to find Gale, and saw him hovering amidst a cloud of deep midnight. The cloud had fixed 2 large eyes on us, smoldering coals the size of meteors, and it wafted towards us with boundless confidence. Gale was struggling, trying to tell us to run, but he was shivering with every labored breath. Whatever the cloud was, it was cold, and that cold was slowly killing our friend. It billowed towards us right up until it hit the lights we held, and then it flinched away with an angry hiss. We reached for Gale as it passed, but he was too far away to grab. Celine called for him, trying to get to the cloud, but I held her back as it swirled and moved about the space. "It's clearly guarding that gem, which is probably how we get out of here. If we go towards it, it's likely to come down and try to stop us. When it does, we can get Gale and the gem and get the hell out of here." Celine thought about it for a minute, taking another glance back at Gale before nodding and following behind me. The way wasn't easy, especially not while being menaced by the cloud, but we hopped from one tile to the next as we made our way towards the gym. I wasn't much help, carrying Buddy and still jumping, but Celine had her light out and was on guard for the cloud as we traveled. The cloud, the true form of the miasma, I'm sure, just kept trying to dive bomb us off the tiles, but the lights we wore and our flashlights kept it far enough back that it never really got close enough to do more than buffet us with cold air. We kept an eye on Gale, his shivering letting us know that he was still alive, and as we came within 2 easy steps of the platform, I started making my plans to rescue him. "Grab the gem," I shouted, and as Celine made a break for the last 2 squares, I watched the cloud. It made a beeline for her, swarming like a fog bank of angry birds, and as it got close, I made a break. Buddy made a nervous sound by my side, seeming to understand the importance but not liking the jostling, and as the cloud passed over the platform, Celine rushed for the emerald. I jumped and passed into the cloud. It was like plunging into a cold shower, and for a moment I just floated inside that chilly abyss. When I bumped into something solid, however, I locked my free hand around it and carried it with me as I fell out the other side. Gale and I both gasped as we landed in a heap on the platform, and I could see the cloud retreating into the murk. Too many lights, I supposed, and I ripped off Gale's covering as I added his lights to ours. Celine helped us up, Buddy shaking off imaginary water as we got our bearings. I had eyes only for the gym, however. It was right there, sitting 5 feet away, pulsating dully on its pedestal. It was our ticket home. I could feel it. "What now?" asked Celine, her hand already inching towards it as she tried to keep that hand at her waist. "Well," I said without much assuredness, "if it's anything like the door inside the stores, we can use it to travel out of here together. We just have to be touching." "Do you think destination is important?" Celine asked, readjusting as she hefted Gale. He was shivering and coughing, the cloud really having done a number on him, and Celine had thrown an arm around him as she tried to keep him on his feet. "I don't know," I said. "I don't think I could picture the store I came in from. Could you?" She shook her head. I lifted Buddy into my arms, my other hand reaching for Celine's as we stepped forward. I took some of Gale's weight onto myself, the two of us looking like friends carrying a drunk home, and it freed up one of her hands for the gym. The arm under Gale grabbed her shirt as well, putting us in contact as we prepared to hopefully travel one final time. "See you on the other side," I said, her hand stretching to grab the crystal. "I hope so." As her fingers came into contact with the surface, everything went dark. For a little bit, I didn't know anything. I was blind, mute, deaf, senseless, adrift, just waiting to land. Felt like hours. Felt like seconds. Then slowly I became aware of something. It was wet and rough and scraping against my face as a worried whine accompanied it. I opened my eyes and saw Gale and Celine lying on the floor of a generic bathroom that could have belonged to any big box store in the country. The lights were on. Buddy had set them off when he got up, and as I sat up, I could already hear a low growl from my two companions. Buddy was dancing around happily, barking with excitement, and I rubbed my head as I tried to shush him. Despite the pounding headache, we had made it. We were somewhere different, somewhere new. "Where are we?" Gale gravelled out, rubbing his head as the two of them blinked owlishly at me. I looked at the bathroom door, hesitated for a moment, and then I pushed it open. I couldn't help but laugh as the signage for the new location came into view. It's the farthest place from Dollar General, and also usually the closest." Gale looked out the door, and after a few seconds, he began to laugh. We walked out onto the floor of the very closed Family Dollar and found ourselves stepping back into our world at 11:17 on December 4th, 2023. I'd been gone for less than 6 months, Gale and Celine for a little less than 25 years, but we were home at last. When the blue and whites started pulling up a few minutes later, I realized our adventure wasn't over yet. Now, we had some explaining to do. You're still here. Thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague here. Always a pleasure to see all my new and old viewers coming by for another one of my spooky tales. If you'd like to support the show, you can always take part in one of our channel offers through Fume or Aura, or you can just click on another video when they come up. I'd really appreciate it. For our newer viewers, we also have lots of playlists and other things if you'd like to get caught up. I know some of my series have been going on for quite a while. If you'd like to get my latest book, there's a link down below that'll take you to my Amazon page. Towesey Homestead just came out, so if that's something you'd like to get your hands on, go ahead and have a look down there. If you'd like a signed copy, you can go ahead and email me from my email address on the site, and I'll get with you about shipping information and ship you a signed copy. If you'd like to support the channel in a more monetary fashion, we also have membership through YouTube, and we've got a Patreon that you can get the information for in the description. We have lots of tiers and everything to suit your needs. Patrons that support on the $10 tier, that's our Ghostly Reader tier, get a book anytime I write one, signed and on their doorstep. As you may have noticed, there's a list of patrons and members on the screen, and I'd like to personally thank every one of them for taking a hand in the future of this channel. Well, that's enough for tonight. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.